Amen. Give me 1 second. I don't know if this is enough. So if you all take a piece of paper. No looking, no conferring. So in your own time, 7 kings of Persia. Remember, no cheating. When you've done, I'll just wait for everybody to finish, then we'll swap papers. Oh, list out the 7 kings of Persia. Sorry. Everyone done? Almost, okay. Brother Douglas, you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Sister Effie, you done? Just shout out when you're finished. Okay, so for those who have finished, if you just swap them with someone sitting next to you. You could swap again, or you could still swap. It still works with 3. Everyone's got different papers. Are you done, Brother Jeffrey? That's fine as many as you have. Could you swap with someone? Okay, go ahead and mark them. And then return them.
How do we know if we're right?
Well done. Okay.
Wendy asked if we're supposed to mark for spelling.
If I said yes, I'd shoot myself in the foot. So,
Are we supposed to hand it back?
yeah, hand it back. Okay. Sister Juliana, give us the list of 7.
Cyrus, the second I don't know how to spell it, and so I didn't know.
Okay.
The third, same thing. The fourth, Darius, it's 1. The fifth, Shesh, obviously.
Zerk. Have you spelt it?
Obviously. The sixth, I have Brahman. The seventh,
Okay, so it's only 2 and 3 that we're missing? Yeah? Sister Daniela?
Number 2 is convicted, and number 3 is false lies.
Okay. So who got all 7? Okay. Most people? Which ones were missing? So you had 2 and 3 missing? Which ones were missing?
I had them down yesterday.
I can't hear you, sorry.
I had them mixed up yesterday when I listed them down. So, yeah.
Okay, so you had it wrong from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have all 7 though, but just in the wrong order?
Yeah.
Okay. Sister Denise? I can't hear.
What?
How did you do?
Oh, I got them all.
You got them all? Oh, okay, I didn't see your hand. At the back, everyone got them or not?
I was missing 2 and 3, and Douglas got them.
2 and 3 were missing.
I guess
Number 6, Arthur Bainers. Got them all? Okay, so we did pretty well. Okay. So I'll just give you the reference for at least 4 smoothies. There's a couple of references. Prophets and Kings, page 572, paragraph 2. PK 572.2. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. If you go to your Bibles and go to the book of Ezra, chapter 4. Remember, we've looked at Ezra 7 and Ezra 6. Just going back to Ezra 4. So I don't know if you have marginal readings in your Bible, but they're having difficulties in building the temple. That's what chapter 4 is about. The Samaritans have asked if they can help to rebuild the temple, and they've been refused by the Jews. Everybody okay where we are in history? The Jews have been in captivity for 70 years. Cyrus has come to the throne. He's released them and allowed them to go back home. Time has gone on, and in the process of rebuilding, the Samaritans want to help them. But their offer of help is basically spurned, and there's this tension or rivalry that exists between the Jews and the Samaritans. You okay with that, Sister Denise?
Yeah, it's just I've always wondered who the adversaries were, and you're saying they're Samaritans, and so I'm just wondering where that came from.
Where the fact that they were Samaritans, where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
It says in my little marginal reading on my Bible,
Yeah.
it says Samaritans. Brother David, these Samaritans, who are they?
Samaritans were related to the Jews. I think they were not full, like half Jews or something to that effect. They mixed, they were not full Jews, cousins or something along those lines.
Half Jews?
I think, yeah.
Okay, anything else you know?
And you just not want to have anything to do with them because they not consider them full Jews, so
Okay, so they don't like each other.
you know, they don't like together.
Okay, anything else?
Not at this moment.
No? Okay. Sister Catherine? What do you know about Samaritans?
They were the leftovers of the Israelites.
The leftovers, I like the way the leftovers. So, sorry, the leftovers of the Israelites.
Yeah, they got destroyed in 722, and they were still around, but they were ruled by other people.
Okay, so we've got a date, 722. What happens in 722? You said they're the leftovers.
The Israelites were destroyed.
Okay, so the Israelites are destroyed in 722, and the Samaritans are the leftovers. You agree with Brother David?
So would that mean that they were Israelites first?
She's asking you.
I said, does that mean that they were formerly Israelites? If they're leftovers?
I don't think they were full blood.
You said you don't think they were?
I don't think they were full blood Jews.
Okay, and your question was, did they used to be? Sister Effie? What do you know about Samaritans?
That's the first time I see Samaria. And so it makes me think that they were part of the 10 tribes. When the kingdom was divided to Judah and then Israel, they were part of Israel. Their capital was Samaria, so it has to have like a connection. That's what I'm just thinking.
Okay, so you've taken us to Isaiah 7, Isaiah 28. Is that what you said? Okay, so we'll quickly turn to Isaiah 7 and 28. And you've picked up a city called Samaria. Did I understand you correctly?
Yes.
Sorry?
There's no verse 28. Did I hear
No,
correctly?
chapter 7 and chapter 28.
Okay.
She said 2 chapters.
Okay. That's what I heard first.
She'll give us the verses in a second.
Okay, so it's from, and then it's verse 9.
Isaiah 7 verse 9.
Yeah.
Just when you said it was first mentioned in Isaiah,
That's where I.
just that where you remembered,
Samaria. Yeah, that's
Okay.
where I remember.
because it's not the first mention of Samaria, but it's where you remembered it. Okay, so we're in Isaiah 7 9, and the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely ye shall not be established. Yeah, so that's a good verse. Sister Juliana, could you explain what that verse means, please? You can't? Or you don't want to?
I prefer not to.
Have a go.
Oh, really?
Come.
No, I prefer not to.
You choose someone else then. Take your place. Which verse? Sorry. 1 second. Sister Wendy, you do it for us. Isaiah 7 verse 9. Tell us what this verse says.
I'm just going to read it again.
Sure.
The head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If ye will not believe, surely ye shall not be established.
I'll just give you a second while you're thinking. Sister Effie, you said Isaiah 28.
Yes.
You're going to struggle a little with Isaiah 28.
I'm sorry?
I think you might struggle a little with Isaiah 28 unless you're going to connect the two.
Yes. I was going to try to connect it.
Okay, so you need Isaiah 7, not Isaiah 28 on its own, because you won't find Samaria in Isaiah 28.
Just because if
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. Did everybody get that? She gave us Isaiah 28 and Isaiah 7, 2 chapters. Isaiah 28 does not have the word Samaria in it. So what she's doing is chain linking verses together. She's got Isaiah 7, and Sister Wendy's going to explain that. And you need to do that before you go to Isaiah 28. And we'll let her explain that in a moment. So all we're doing now is just a small exercise in how to read a verse that perhaps some of us are not familiar with, but it's connected to a famous chapter. Isaiah 7 is a famous chapter in our movement. Go ahead, Sister Wendy.
I'm not sure, but I'll try. The head of Ephraim is Samaria.
Okay, so we'll go with that bit. The head of Samaria, the head of Ephraim is Samaria.
Employing as the leader, or the country that they're from. That looks really the next one, the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son.
We'll go with the first bit first. The reason is, if you're going to do the second bit, you should be able to do the first bit because they're both following the same pattern. The head of something. So, we'll go with William Miller's rule. He's got 14 rules. We'll target rule 1 and 5. Does anybody know what rule 1 and 5 is? Reverend Douglas? William Miller's rules. Do you know what rule 1 and 5 is?
Top of my head,
Mm-hmm.
I know.
You can just say no if you don't know. That's,
Well, I don't know top of my head.
that's fine. Someone pull the rules up, please. Someone find them. You have them? Okay. So we already have them up now. So read rule number 1.
Every word must have its proper bearing on the subject presented in the Bible.
Okay? And rule number 5.
Scripture must be its own expositor, since it is a rule of itself. If I depend on the
We'll stop there. Okay, read rule number 1 again, just the first bit.
every word must have its proper bearing.
And rule number 5, the first bit.
Scripture must be its own expositor.
Okay, so I'm making a suggestion that in your studies, rule 1 and rule 5 are the ones that you're going to come up with over and over again. So rule number 1 and rule number 5 are the ones that you use most frequently, from my experience. Rule number 1 says what, Sister Daniela?
Every word must have its proper bearing.
Okay, so you just
You want me to explain that?
explain. Yeah, what does that mean?
That means that each word there's a reason why it's there, there's a function for that particular word, and it should be given its attention. Something like that.
Okay, just go with the first bit. I think that's sufficient. Repeat what you said.
Each word is important.
Each word is important. Anybody want to add to that? I want to go with each word is important. That's what rule number 1 says. Anyone else want to rephrase it in another way? Go ahead.
Each word is important and is leading. It has a bearing, meaning it's taking you somewhere. You have to pay attention to it.
Okay.
All scripture is inspired.
Is that what you think rule number 1 says? All scriptures is inspired?
All scripture is given.
Okay. Rule number 5. Read it out. Just the first part.
Scripture must be its own expositor.
Sister Catherine?
It will explain itself.
Okay. If something is explaining something, what is that? What document or book? What kind of a book or document do we call that? Sorry? A dictionary. So what's rule number 5 saying?
Bible is its own dictionary.
The Bible is its own dictionary. So if we were super good, really clever, we wouldn't need external dictionaries. We would allow the Bible to be its own dictionary. And the more you can do that, the safer you are in your answers. So rule number 5 is the Bible should explain itself, which essentially is its own dictionary. And rule number 1 is what, Sister Daniela?
Every word is important.
Every word is important. Okay, so rule number 1 is a bit tricky, in my opinion. And I don't know if you think it's a tricky rule. Do you think it's tricky, Sister Denise?
Not right offhand, I'm just looking at it on the surface.
Okay, it seems pretty benign to you. Okay, so the problem that I find is we're in Isaiah 7:9 and we're in the first part of the verse, and the head of Ephraim is Samaria. Okay? So each word has its what word did you say?
Each word is important.
Okay, so each word is important. So I'm just going to rephrase that and say each word has its importance. Yeah? So you tell me in that 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, I think it's 6 words. 1 is supplied, the word is, but we'll include that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria. It's got 7 words there. Yeah? You tell me which word is important. Or let me rephrase it. Which word is the most important?
I think head, because what is head? Is it a king, a leader, or a city?
Okay, so when I said the rule itself seems benign, can you see what the problem is already? What's the problem with this rule?
And the oven is, well, actually, it goes.
I asked you which word is important. So what's the problem with this rule?
The every word.
That's not what the problem is, because I'm asking what your opinion is. If I'd asked Sister Rachel what's the most important word in those 7, would she have given the same answer as you?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. So the rule itself is subjective. The rule is fine in a benign sense. Every word has its importance. But if I asked you which is the most important word, you'd say head, and she might say, no, it's not, it's Ephraim. Ephraim is much more important. So when you're doing your studies and you're employing these rules, rule number 1 and 5 are the ones you're going to deal with over and over again. And in their simplified version, it's every word has its proper importance or its weight or its bearing, and the Bible should be its own explainer. But rule number 1, it depends what your study is. Now, I would ask you which word is important. You said head. But maybe you're really familiar with Isaiah 7. You know, you've been researching it for 6 months and you're familiar with it. And you're doing study A. You're here in my place, you're teaching the class, and you're saying, we're going to look at Isaiah 7:9, and we want to understand a certain aspect of it. And therefore, the word head, that might be the important word. But if you could do a separate study on the same verse, and you say, actually, in this separate study, head isn't that important. What we really want to focus on is the word Samaria. So, rule number 1 is not only subjective from person to person, it also can change depending on the focus of your study. Because we can go to inspiration and it's multidimensional. It's not this verse is always going to give us the same answer. Any verse can give us multiple answers depending on the question that we're asking. We could ask 2 or 3 easy questions for Isaiah 7:9 and we'd get 2 or 3 different answers back. Would you agree with that? And depending on the question, depends which word are the important ones and which words are not so important. I agree the rule says every word is important, but certain words have more prominence than others. So I want us to remember that when you're looking at what you should try to be doing is thinking rule number 1, rule number 5. Let the Bible explain itself. That's fine. Rule number 1, try and understand which words are the important ones. And it depends what you're looking at that will decide which word is the important one and which one isn't. You okay with that, Sister Wendy? Yeah. So, out those 7 words, which one would you target? Sister Denise said head. Which one do you think is most important?
I think I agree with head. In this.
That's fine, you agree? Yeah? I concur as well. I think in this short little part of the verse, head is the one that we want to target. Because we want to know, what does that mean? Because once we can decode what that means, the rest of it is relatively straightforward. Okay? So we'll go with that. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria. So simply, what does that mean?
Head? I'm not sure. I have to. Can you look at? I mean, when you
You
say
could.
the Bible interprets itself, does that include the Strong's because it's in language?
No, it doesn't, in fact. Strong's does not include the Bible explaining itself. Not saying Strong's is not useful or not good, and we don't need to do a deep word search on this. Just conceptually, if I said the head of Ephraim is Samaria, you have an idea of what head means. So tell us what you think this is saying.
Leader or I don't know.
We'll go with,
Leader.
yeah, that's a good word. So rephrase that.
The leader of Ephraim is Samaria.
Okay? So the leader of Ephraim is Samaria. Everybody okay with that? Anybody want to choose a different word?
I'm curious because I went to verse 8, and it says the head of Syria is Damascus, and aren't those both like cities? And so then it makes me wonder if it means capital or the city is the leader of another city.
Okay, so
Still a leader, so.
we're in verse 7, and perhaps we're not familiar with what Samaria is, because we live in the 21st century. However, verse 8 uses the same structure. Just read that again for us.
For which one?
8.
For the head of Syria is Damascus.
Okay, so everyone knows what Damascus is. It's a city that's in existence today. Okay, it is a city in Syria. So, using that idea, then you're inferring that Samaria would also be a city. So, tell us how you read that first part. The head of Ephraim is Samaria. What's that saying?
It looks like to me, it sounds like capital.
Yeah, go ahead and say that then.
The capital of Ephraim is Samaria.
Okay.
But then when I go to the next line.
We'll stop with that bit. Sister Wendy, what do you think?
Yeah, that, it confuses me a little bit because it seems to be talking about people and not just cities.
Where?
Well, Ephraim, I don't know, I'm not very good with history. I don't know if Ephraim is a city.
Okay, so you don't know if Ephraim is a city. Okay, Sister Effie, you brought us here. What is Ephraim?
It's
A place?
Initially, yeah, initially it was a tribe, but not part of the original 12 tribes. I just read also that the mountain called Ephraim.
So Ephraim is the name of one of Joseph's sons, and Joseph doesn't have an inheritance. His 2 sons get the inheritance. And then Ephraim becomes a symbol of the 10 tribes as they split. So sometimes they're called Israel, sometimes they're called Ephraim. So it becomes a symbol of the 10 tribes. Maybe it's not that easy to see it here, but we'll go with that. So the head of the 10 tribes is Samaria. So I think Sister Denise is correct. The capital of the nation of the 10 tribes is Samaria. Okay? Brother Douglas, the second part, Isaiah 7:9.
And the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. So it's talking that the king, the one who is in charge, is Remaliah's son.
Everyone okay with that? Yeah? So, Sister Juliana, what is that second part of the verse saying? If you agreed with Brother Douglas?
That's what he said.
Can you just remind us what he said? What does head mean in that context? The leader of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. Okay? So we could perhaps use king instead of leader. Might be leader. So the capital of Ephraim is Samaria, and the king of Samaria is Remaliah's son. Yeah? Brother David, who is Remaliah's son? Do you know? Okay. Does anybody know?
I would say
No? What software are people using? What software do you use?
I use eSword.
Okay.
Strong's. Mm.
Have you got Nave's Bible on you? Nave's. It's just the name of a Bible. Or a dictionary, I should say, not a Bible. Nave's topical Bible. It's a famous one. The only reason I'm asking, there are various tools that are available on eSword, on most Bible software, that can quickly and easily help you to locate information like that.
Okay.
Is that with an N or a K-N?
Nave.
I do have it, yes.
You have Naves? So if you had Remaliah, if you're in the verse and you highlighted Remaliah and went to Naves, it will tell you who Remaliah was.
Okay.
So tell me if you can do that.
Hold up another verse. Was that 8 verse 6? The root word for it is 87425.
That's not Naves. Naves won't do that for you. That's Strong's you're doing. Say that again?
It's a module.
It's a module on eSword
Within the
that you download.
yeah. Yeah, name's topical Bible, right?
Yeah.
That's the one. Okay, I have it downloaded. So it's like, so I highlighted
Remaliah, and if you go to Naves, it should tell you some history on there and on Remaliah. You found it, anyone? James? Sorry? Okay, so it says, the father of Pekah, king of Israel. So, were you able to find it yet or not?
No, not yet.
Okay.
It's not working for me.
Did you? Were you able to look? You don't have it? Okay. You on my sword? Okay. So have you ever downloaded modules from my sword?
I do.
Okay. So you've never done that. I don't know. Soft documents or books. You have different documents, different books, different Bibles. So you can download a lot of extra information than is just the factory version that you receive when you download it. So you've never done that. Okay. Okay. So we've got, he's the father of Pekah. Pekah is one of the last kings of Israel. So we're in Isaiah 7:9. The capital city of Ephraim, the 10 tribes, is Samaria. The leader or the king of Samaria is Pekah, who is Remaliah's son. And then the last part, if you won't believe the promise that God's showing you, you won't be established. So it picks up Samaria. Samaria is the capital city of the 10 tribes. And then you took us to Isaiah 28. That says what? What's Isaiah 28?
Isaiah 28 gives us some more information about the 10 tribes and how they weren't established because essentially they didn't do like the consequences of that one came true. So I'm looking at, I was just connecting Samaria with Ephraim because Isaiah 28 talks about Ephraim, the drunkards of Ephraim.
Which verse are you in?
I'm reading 1, 2, 3.
1, 2 and 3?
Yeah, 1, 2, 2 and 3.
So verse 1, Isaiah 28 verse 1, woe to the crown of pride to the drunkards of Ephraim, verse 2. What are you picking up from verse 2?
It's just describing how the consequences of the action would look like, so who God is going to use to correct them.
Okay, so verse 2 is about their destruction. Verse 3, the crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim shall be trodden underfoot. So, Sister Wendy, okay? Verse 1, 2 and 3, chapter 28. Just, okay, we're there, yeah? Are you okay with Isaiah 7? Did you have any? Okay, so that's okay. So in Isaiah 28, we'll just go with verse 1. It says, woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim. So the first thing we want to notice there is a literary style. So you've done parables during the week. What's happening, we're all in the English, the verse is broken down into various parts by those commas. So what did you notice in the first two, Sister Ruth? What would you describe that as?
So I see that Ephraim here has been once had a glorious beauty.
Let me stop you there. I'm not asking at the moment to break down what those phrases meant, which is what we did before. What I'm asking here, it says, woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim. What are you picking up from that?
So woe is not a good thing. So
I'm not asking you to break down the words. Before we even do that, I want us to notice something. A literary style. I don't know if you know what that means.
like parable.
Perhaps, yeah. Can you notice something? Can you explain further? Brother Jeffrey, what can you notice?
I think you're asking what kind of figure of speech that is, right?
I'm not sure. You explain.
Well, I think, I'm not sure, I haven't learned that in a long time, or in a while. I think there's woe to the crown of pride is a metaphor,
Okay.
I think. Could be wrong.
So that's correct. A metaphor is like a parable. It's another way of expressing that. Brother James. So if we go back to what we read, it says to the, and then there's a comma. It says to the. Can we see that repeating pattern? Woe to the, and then there's a comma, and then it says to the. You can see that repeat. So when you're approaching a verse, you want to not only see which words are important to try and define them, you also want to look for patterns. And this one, it's relatively easy to see a repeat and enlarge here, or a repeating pattern, which is a form of parable. That's why I didn't want to say that what you were saying was incorrect. It is a parable, but it's a certain type of parable. It's not a classic parable that we're familiar with. The natural follows to the spiritual, because it doesn't work like that. You can't say the natural and the spiritual in this context in that same way that you would do a sheep and a person, or a shepherd and Christ. It's not that simple. Does that make sense, Brother Larry? Yeah, you can see to the crown, to the drunkards, yeah? So we can see the Bible is repeating itself. Sister Denise?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to now use rule number 5. What's rule number 5?
The Bible is its own dictionary.
Good. So the Bible explains itself. So when I ask you this question now, make sure you don't explain it. Okay, so I want the Bible to explain it. Obviously you have to answer. So you tell me when it says the crown of pride. What is the crown of pride?
Just in the first line, the drunkards of Ephraim.
Good. So everybody see that? The Bible is explaining itself. So if I were to ask you, when we go back to Isaiah 7:9, we said the head of Ephraim is Samaria, the capital of the 10 tribes is the city of Samaria, the leader of Samaria is Pekah, who was Remaliah's son. So you can see this cascading pattern that's going on there. It's kind of like a repeat and enlarge, but it's not a classic repeat and enlarge. We couldn't say that Pekah is Samaria. It doesn't work that way. It's this cascading pattern. So we're in here, it says, woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim. So Sister Denise says, the crown of pride is the drunkards of Ephraim. What's that talking about? The crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim. If we factor in Isaiah 7:9, what's it talking about, or who is it talking about, or what is it talking about? So my question is, I would ask, what is the crown of pride, or who are the drunkards of Ephraim? Does that make sense, Sister Wendy? No? Okay, so if I were to ask you, the drunkards of Ephraim, the drunkards are what, according to the verse?
The crown of pride.
Okay, so we can do that, yeah? So we've got the people who are drunk. So it's not any people that are drunk. It's the people who are drunk, where? From what place? From Ephraim. So they're the drunkards of Ephraim. And who are the drunkards of Ephraim? Who are these people that are drunk? It's the crown of pride. Okay, so what is a crown?
Well, it can be the top of your head.
Okay. So it can be your head. What else is it?
Something that shows kingship.
Okay, so it's a hat that shows authority or power. Okay, so what do you think it is? Do you think it's talking about the rim of your head, the crown, or you think it's talking about the hat?
Probably the hat.
Okay, why would you think that? Perhaps because of this?
Yeah, that, or we're talking about a nation, a group of people.
Okay, so the crown of pride is a symbol of leadership. So who's drunk?
The leadership.
The leadership is drunk. So who's this talking about?
The leadership.
If we go back and factor in Isaiah 7, because that's what Sister Effie wanted to do. Remember, we're only in this passage because we took Ephraim, and we got Ephraim from Isaiah 7. So she's linked them together. So what is this talking about?
The leadership is departing.
And where is the leadership? Isaiah 7.
Where are they?
What are they? we had, how many types of leadership did we have in Isaiah 7?
One.
Remember, there was repeat. It says the head, the head. So it's at least two. So tell me what the heads are.
Samaria and Ramallah.
Okay, so it's the capital city. That's one of the heads or the leaders, and the other one is Pekah. So we've got Samaria or Pekah. So what is it here? Oh,
And Pekka.
P-A-K?
No, P-E-K-A.
Yeah, I didn't finish it off.
Oh, okay.
So what's it referring to here? Is it referring to Pekah or is it referring to Samaria when it's talking about this? So you think Pekah. That's fine. I'm just going to change this a little bit to say the king. Is it talking about the king or is it talking about the city? So you're saying the king. Sister Effie, this was your verse. Would you agree with that? It's talking about the king. So, woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. So, and we're not going to break down the verse too much, it's perhaps a little bit involved, but it picks up the phrase, which are on the head of the fat valleys. What does that mean, Sister Catherine? The head of the fat valleys. Let me ask you a different question. The head of the fat valleys, do you think that would be talking about a person? So that's not talking about a person then. So we know the verse itself then isn't just, it's not as simple to just say it's a king. Not denying that it might be a king in the first part, but when you start going into the verse, the head of a fat valley, if we're going to use the idea that a head is someone that's in something that's in charge, kings are not heads of fat valleys. Agree with that? Okay, so what is it? What is the head of a fat valley? The people. Okay, so when we're looking at a verse, we're approaching it, we don't know what the verse is saying, we don't know what it means, we need to start applying some kind of rule, some kind of systematic methodology to try to interrogate it. What have we done so far, Sister Ruth? Tell me some of the things we've already discussed this morning.
So we have established that Biant's rules must apply.
Okay, name the ones that we've spoken of.
We have spoken of the first one, which is that every word,
In your own words.
yes, every word in the passage has its own weight, is important.
So rule 1 says every word is important, but we didn't say that. We adjusted the rule and rephrased it in a different way. Read rule 1. Read rule 1 for us, just the first part.
Every word must have its proper bearing.
Okay, so you did it correctly. It says every word is important or has a relative importance. But what did I say? I didn't do the rule that way.
That each word carries its own weight, but we should also take the key, like the key word.
Okay, so that's what I said. When you're approaching a passage or a set of words, look for the key word that would help you in your particular study. So I've adjusted the rule slightly. Every word is important. That's what that rule says. But I'm saying there are certain words that are more important than others. And if we're doing a study, we want to try and say which word is important. Okay, so we've used rule number 1. What else did we look at?
So we also looked at rule number 5.
Rule number 5.
That says that the Bible should explain itself, it is its own dictionary.
So the Bible should explain itself. So we've done those. What else have we looked at? Ways of approaching verses.
So we should also look at a pattern in the verse. Anything that repeats, see that is emphasizing something.
Okay, so we've looked at repeat and enlarge. And at first sight, it's not obvious to see that, but Brother James showed us that it says to the. And when it's pointed out, you say, okay, well, it's easy to see. So we looked at rule 1, rule 5, repeat and enlarge. Repeat and enlarge is only a small subset of what topic or what subject title or what area of investigation. Parables. So parables cover a lot of territory, much more than we think. It's not as simple as saying natural and spiritual, because this is not natural and spiritual really. It's a bit more sophisticated than that. Repeat and enlarge is a form of parables. So we've looked at things. So another thing that we want to think about as we're approaching this verse, because we've gone from Isaiah 7 to Isaiah 28, and we've worked out that drunkards of Ephraim, the crown of pride. We've seen the repeat and enlarge, and Sister Wendy says this looks like people. Drunkards, it sounds like people. So it's the people who have pride. It talks about the crown, so it looks like it's talking about a king. We had the name Pekah from Isaiah 7. Pekah might be dead by the time this history is being fulfilled. So that's why I said I've swapped it from Pekah to king. Does that make sense? Yeah? Because I'm not sure that Isaiah 7 and Isaiah 28 is exactly the same history, same year. We don't know that. But we also had Samaria in Isaiah 7. The head is Samaria, the head is the king. So it seems the first part of the verse is talking about people or kings, but then it says the head of the fat valleys. So what we want to now look at, if I said the head of the fat valleys, which is the important word for you, Brother David?
I would say
Head. Brother Douglas? I can't hear you, sorry?
I would say head as well.
Head. Sister Catherine, this was your question? Head? Okay, what was my question to you? Okay, so you said it wasn't. So my question was, is the head of the fat valleys kings or people? And you said no. Why do you say no? How do you know it's not people? What's making you think it's not people? If you're not sure, just say you're not sure. Okay, so I'm going to reread this to you. Okay. So the head of the palatial palace. Okay, the head of the palatial palace. Now, what are we talking about? Okay, so why have you changed your answer? Okay, so what words have I changed? I changed to palace from what? I changed something that was in the verse and I changed it to the word palace. What word did I change to palace? Valley. So my question to you now is, what is the important word? Sorry?
Valleys.
Valley is the important word. Can we see that, Brother Douglas? Valley is the important word because it's now defining what the head would be. So, depending on what your focus is, depends on what the important word is. So, because we've been going through this, head seems the intuitive word that's important. Because we want to understand what the head means. But to understand what the head means, you have to go to the context, and it's the word valley that's going to shape and define what head means. So she got their answer correct to begin with. The head can't be about people. People aren't the leaders of valleys. I don't go to a valley and say, do what I want, do what you're told to do. It doesn't work that way. But as soon as I change the word valley to palace, who lives in palaces? Who's in charge of a palace? It's the king. So it defines what that head is. So the defining word is valley, or the important word, which brings us to another principle. Are we okay how we approach that? Brother Larry, did that make sense? When we start studying what's difficult is that you think you got it. You think, okay, we've got the heads, it's all working good. And then you get to the next bit and everything that you thought was okay just gets sort of torn up and you think, oh, I thought I got this. And it's a lot harder than you first think. And it is. I don't want to pretend that it isn't. But that's the beauty of coming together. It's not that I know more than you. It's when you come together and mind works with mind, you can see things. Okay, so valleys is the important word I'm suggesting. And if we were to look at concepts or ideas, valleys are to do with geography. If we're okay with that? So if I were to talk about geography, would I be talking about kings or cities, Sister Wendy? Talking about cities. So now what we're doing is we're introducing a geographical model into the verse, and we want to switch to geography now. Does that make sense? Because it tells us to talk about geography. It points us to geography. So now when we want to start thinking about geography, what do I mean by that? If you go to, don't turn there, if you went to Revelation 14, verse 6, there's an angel flying in the midst of heaven. Verse 8, another angel comes. Verse 9, another angel comes. And we get to about verse 12. Often we don't talk about the verses that come after that, verse 13 to the end of the chapter. But if we were to look at those verses, Revelation 14, the last part of the chapter, it's actually shown here on this chart. You've got verse 6, verse 8, verse 9. So you've got the verses there. And then this is the last part of the chapter. You okay with that? Check Revelation 14. So you can see some of the symbology, and for me, if we were looking at the symbology there, what would be the key concept? If we were looking here at this, I don't know if you can see the picture work, Brother Jeffrey, what would be the key theme, or I'll say the key word, but in this it's a picture. What would be the key thought here that you're seeing? Come right up close. We've got Jesus. There's an angel telling Jesus what to do. There's another angel, and there's another angel who's telling this angel what to do. So you've got four beings. We can split them into 2 and 2. And in the first coupling, what's happening? And in the second coupling,
Same thing.
same thing. And what are they telling them to do? I don't know if you can read it from there. Come right up close. What are they telling them to do? Can you see the banner? Right there.
Thrust in thy sickle and reap.
And this one says?
Thrust in thy sharp sickle and gather.
So they're saying the same thing. Yeah? So, what would be the premier symbol that's being brought to view here? He tells them what to do, and this person and this person are doing the same thing. What have they got in their hand?
Sickle.
They've got a sickle. So, thank you. We've got sickles now. So what imagery is being brought to view here, Brother David?
Harvest.
Harvest. Or we could call it a model of agriculture. So Revelation 14 really is a model of agriculture. We're here in Isaiah 28 verse 1, and what model have we got? Sister Wendy? Geography. So we want to spot these different models, whether it's geography or whether it's agriculture. And when you can do that, it helps you to approach the verse in a right way. Are you okay with that, Sister Denise? Yeah? So Revelation 14, its focus is about these sickles that are doing this work. A sickle is an instrument for harvest. It actually says, thrust in thy sickle and reap. Reaping is to do with harvest. And if you were to look at the verse, it talks about the harvest period. So we've got agriculture and we've got geography. And there are some other ones that we could think about. What's the one that we've already discussed in our class? What model have we discussed in our class already? Sister Catherine? Not today. If you're not sure, say you're not sure. Sorry? Building, which is not what we're building. What model would we call that? We'll go with building, that's fine. So we've got agriculture, we've got geography, and I'll call it construction or building. Sister Denise, Matthew 25.
Look it up.
No, you know Matthew 25, verses 1 to 13. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, 5 of whom were wise, 5 of whom are foolish. So you know that. So what's that about? What's that story about?
Two groups of people, one was ready and one was
It's about virgins.
training.
And what are those virgins doing?
They are waiting
For what?
for the bridegroom
So what's the story about?
to marry.
Marriage. So we've got, you list the ones that we've got so far. The themes or the models. What's this model about? Okay, so we've got, list them out.
Agriculture, geography, marriage.
Remember the last one? Sister Catherine? Construction, building. We did that already. Day for a year. Brother Douglas, day for a year, the Bible verses.
The day for a year,
Mm-hmm.
the 2 Bible verses,
Yes, please.
and Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4:6.
Okay, and we pulled up some symbology from those verses, or at least one of those verses, that helped us to understand one of these themes. Do you remember that? You weren't here when we did it initially, but I think you were here when we... Do you know what I'm talking about?
Maybe not.
Okay. Brother Larry? Brother Jeffrey, which verse? Numbers or Ezekiel?
For what?
A model that we'd already looked at. We looked at a model at one of those 4 before, and we launched into that investigation from one of these 2 verses. Ezekiel 4:6. We looked at Ezekiel 4:6. How does Ezekiel 4:6 give us one of these models? Which model did it give us? Agriculture, geography, marriage, or construction? It gave us construction. How does a verse, Ezekiel 4:6, give us construction? Do you remember how we did that?
Can I read the verse?
You can, but it won't help you. Because it wasn't the words of the verse that helped us to do that.
I guess because it was a part of something that goes.
Okay, I'll help you. We went to another Bible verse. Sister Juliana, what other Bible verse did we go to? Sister Effie? So we went to John 2:20. And John 2:20 said, there are 46 years to build a temple. So how does Ezekiel 4:6 help us?
I guess the chapter and the verse. What's this?
Excellent. So we took up Ezekiel 4:6, and we noticed it said 4:6. We took that as a symbol, and this is not just the words, this is just a Bible reference. 46. Someone remembered John 2:20, which spoke about 46 years. So we already spoke about a construction model in the Millerite history that was the construction of a temple. So we'd already looked at construction. We haven't looked at Matthew 25, but we know that's marriage. Gave an example here of Revelation 14, which is agriculture. Agriculture comes up a lot. And now we've noticed geography. So if we're talking about geography then, and we're in Isaiah 28, what is the head of the fat valleys? Sister Effie.
We said that the fat valleys are palatial.
No, don't. It wasn't palatial palace. That was my way of showing Catherine what the important word was.
Alright.
So don't be deceived that I was defining what a fat valley was. It's not a palace.
Okay, so you're asking me about the head. What is the head of the fat valley? It will have to be the capital
Okay, the capital.
of the fat valley.
Okay, you mentioned about mountains earlier. I think it was you. What did you say about mountains?
I noticed that there's a mountain called Biant.
Okay, so Samaria, it's a city. Where's it built? Mm-mm.
Around the mountain, close to a mountainous area.
So in the olden days, where would you want to build your cities?
In the valley.
Because if you build it in the valley, all your enemies are going to come and pour into you. Where would you want to build a city? On a mountain. So they found a mountain called Samaria, and they built a city on it. They called it Samaria. So it's built on the hill of Samaria. Okay? So the head of the fat valleys, what's it saying? Samaria. So Samaria is a mountain or a hill, and it's the head of the fat valleys. So the imagery here becomes a bit complex, so I'm not expecting us to do this. By the way, it's same in verse 4, Isaiah 28 verse 4. The glorious beauty which is on the head of the fat valley shall be a fading flower and as a hasty fruit. So I just want to show us a bit of geography. I can't remember the number of hills, but I think it might be 7, it may not. There's a chain of hills that looks like this. It's not obvious if you went to a map, like Google Maps, but when you're there, I think it's more easy to see. Okay, so if I were to sort of to get this and refigure it, no, I'll leave it at that at the moment. So these are hills, and in between each hill there'd be a slight valley. So this is a simplified version of the geography. This area here would be a valley. Okay, and it's rich and fertile. So if this is a rich, fertile valley, which would be the head? The bigger one, yeah? So I've put it here deliberately. So this would be the head of the fat valleys. Fat means what? Sorry? Fertile, yes. Fertile valleys. And the head of these fertile valleys is going to be the hill of Samaria, where they build the city. The most prominent hill, the most famous place. So Sister Wendy made an important point when she said about the crown. She said it could be a hat, but what else could it be? What else is the crown? It's the top of your head. It's this bit here. Okay, so there's a lot of imagery or symbology that's going on here. There's this geography here, but it mentions in verse 4 this fading flower. So there was a tradition in this part of the country that on festival days, what they would do is make a garland. Everybody know what a garland is? Says Rachel, what's a garland?
A wreath of flowers.
A wreath. Can we change it to a different word from wreath? Sorry? Or a chain. So I can call it a chain of flowers. But it's a wreath. And so what they would do is they'd get these flowers, turn them into a wreath or a chain, and they would put them where? On their head, on the crown. So it's not a literal crown, but there's all this imagery that's brought to view in these words. There's a geography bit. There's a festival where they would beautify themselves with these flowers, which explains verse 4, because the flowers should look pristine and beautiful, but they're actually fading flowers. Okay. So all we've done so far is just seen how we can use rules to understand verses. So I just want to summarize and add some information. So we spoke about Samaritans. Why did we get to Samaritans? One second. What? Sorry? I don't understand what you're saying. Yes, I know. Well, I know. I'm finishing. I'm summarising. Yes. Why did we get to Samaria? Why did the subject even come up?
We're trying to figure out who the Samaritan.
Why did we ask the question who the Samaritans are? Yes. So we're looking at false Smerdis, which is which king number, Sister Denise? Which king number is he? False Smerdis. 3. King number 3, and there's a connection between him and the Samaritans. In Ezra 4 it says the adversaries of Judah. The adversaries of Judah are the Samaritans. So I asked, who are the Samaritans? So the Samaritans is what we all said. They're these 10 tribes. The 10 tribes of Israel become the Samaritans. The name itself, Samaritans, comes from the geography. They built their capital city at the head of this valley system on the hill of Samaria, and they picked up the name Samaritans from that. 723, 722, 721, Sister Catherine gave us 722. In that history, the Assyrians, an enemy, are going to come to the 10 tribes and destroy them. That's Isaiah 28 verse 2. They're going to do that because these people have become drunk. I'm not sure what that exactly means, but we'll say they've become drunk or intoxicated with false doctrines. So they're in apostasy and they're going to be punished. They're going to be punished by the person in Isaiah 28 verse 2. When he destroys them, they become scattered and they end up intermingling with the Gentiles, and they become the Samaritans that we know in the New Testament. So that's where these Samaritans, the concept or the idea of where they've been or where they come from. So when Sister White says the Samaritans, she's using a New Testament term that we're all familiar with, the Samaritans and the Jews, but their root comes, or their history comes from this destructive work by this empire that comes and destroys them, the Assyrians in this history, which is connected to what Brother Marco was doing yesterday when you were doing, I think, the 7 thunders, or the seven times, the 25-20, I think that's what I saw on the board work. So that history there is the roots or the origins of the Samaritans. They come from a place called Samaria. It's a country, it's a hill, it's a city. It's the 10 tribes who are going to be destroyed because of their sins. They get scattered, they intermingle with other nations, and they become the Samaritans. All of this is happening over 100 years before false Smerdis. So it's the 10 tribes, Ephraim. They get destroyed, they get scattered, they intermingle with various nations. More than 100 years before false Smerdis is coming. So by the time you get to false Smerdis, these people are now doing their own thing. They're not really considered part of God's people. The 10 tribes are scattered. They're now going to be called Samaritans, and they want to help with reconstructing the temple. The Jews say no, and then they, in Ezra 4 verse 1, they become the adversaries of the people. Just want to mention one small point, which is why we got here in the first place. In Ezra 4:7, it says Artaxerxes, and in the days of Artaxerxes. So it's a bit tricky, because Artaxerxes is king number what? It's king number 7. But this Artaxerxes is not number 7 king. This Artaxerxes is actually king number 3. He comes by a different name. So let me read what Ellen White says. During the reign of Cambyses, the work of the temple progressed slowly. And during the reign of false Smerdis, it was even worse. She doesn't say that, that's my paraphrase. And false Smerdis is called Artaxerxes in Ezra 4 verse 7. So it's all a bit tricky if you're not careful. Artaxerxes in chapter 4 is not Artaxerxes in chapter 7. He was given another name. You can call him Artaxerxes, or you can call him False Smerdis. So that's why we went here, because that's False Smerdis is not given in the scriptures. Ellen White wants to point it out historically that his name was Artaxerxes in Ezra 7, and he's associated with the enemies, who are the Samaritans. And the Samaritans, 10 tribes. We'll recover that, we'll recap this after breakfast.
What was the reference we just read?
PK 572, paragraph 2. The one I gave it earlier on. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy. We want to ask for a blessing upon the study that we've just done. Help us, Lord, to continue to be blessed and guided by your Holy Spirit. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.